Good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. Welcome to our session at the African Chatbot and Conversational AI Summit, of which this is a second edition. And our session today is speaking about building a voice ecosystem in Africa. My name is Kathleen Siminyu. I am a machine learning fellow at Mozilla Foundation, working to build a data set for Kiswahili speech recognition, and then subsequently also training speech recognition models. And I am joined by a fellow panel mate and a fellow Women in Voice ambassador, Miss Denny, who I will let introduce herself. So Denny, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, good evening. So my name is Oluwabusayo Adeni. I reside in Nigeria, Africa, for those who are outside Africa, yeah. So I also, with Kathleen, we are in the Women in Voice team. We're just a group of ambassadors working to bring awareness to the voice ecosystem in Africa. So I currently work as a conversation designer at Reliance Health, which is a health insurance company in Nigeria. The company is moving to be global. So very soon you'll be hearing of us in the US, in Egypt, and the rest. So yeah, that's pretty much it about me. Thank you.
Okay, cool. We look forward to your organization going global.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we proceed, I'm going to pass on apologies from two other members of our panel who unfortunately were not able to make it to our recording today. So that's Rebecca Riakitimbo and Amma Dadson. And while this conversation is unfortunately going to be a two-person conversation, we hope that you find value in it. That being said, moving forward, let's speak about community building efforts. So, Denny, perhaps we can start with you because you're the only one here. What has your experience with being a Women in Voice ambassador been so far? Feel free to share anything about it. It's, I think, 3 months into the journey. How has it been?
Well, so I would say it's been great so far. I mean, we have a vast range of people in at least 5 countries in Africa, which is, I mean, you get to interact a lot with people from other cultures. So it makes interactions a lot more eye-opening, more interesting, because, I mean, you're coming with a perspective and others have a different perspective. So for community building efforts, I think that, yes, I mean, we are working as Africa now, but the ultimate goal is to spread out to other countries, to have smaller chapters in other countries. So I think this is a good foundation for what we aim to achieve. A good foundation in the sense that we are able to have an idea how things are in other countries, our neighboring countries at least, and then we can use that to inform decisions we make within our own chapters by the time we move out. And for now, it's been amazing because, I mean, we've been able to get a few more people sign up on our chapter. And yeah, the aim is to impact. We've also had a webinar. We should have another webinar later this month or next, where we try to let people know how they can transition into the voice ecosystem. Because, I mean, when we talk tech, the idea is always, I don't have a background in tech, so I can't come into tech. So the idea for us, which our last webinar was on, was how can people really know what the voice ecosystem entails, debunk the idea behind those, it's all up there, and then also let people know how they can transition into this field. So I think that's what I have to say for our community building efforts for now. hopefully we have
Okay.
so many more things as time goes on.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm glad that you've chosen to focus on, you know, the positives and the wins. So maybe I'll take a couple of minutes to just speak about some of the challenges, because it is a volunteer effort, and you find that it's a good thing that there's several of us, because sometimes people get busy and sort of disappear, and then availabilities vary essentially. So sometimes some are available, sometimes some are not available. And I think that has been a challenge, just managing people's schedules, finding out when people can be available. And actually, I'm going to take this moment to plug the fact that we do have the Women in Voice chapter and are always open to having volunteers. So if you would like to plug in, please reach out to us. There is a lot to do, and we can certainly accommodate more. That being said, let's talk a bit more about what roles are available in the voice ecosystem. So I know you're a conversational designer. Maybe we can talk a bit more about that and how you got into this role. So what is your background, and what does someone who wants to get into conversational design need to know or need to do to get there one day?
All right, thank you. So for coming specifically to the conversation design field, so there's even a lot in the conversation design field. So one might choose to specialize, or one might choose to just be a generalist, basically. So before I go into details, basically some people might wonder, what is conversation design? So conversation design basically is designing the conversations or the interactions between our virtual assistants and our users. So the idea is to have it could be a chat bot, it could be a voice bot, it could even be an email bot. So it's to bring it more into context. Think of Siri, Alexa, and then think of the United Bank for Africa's Leo, and so that gives you some more context. So for Siri and Alexa, those are voice bots, and they're voice assistants as we know them to be. They all fall under the same calendar. And then for the banks, United Bank for Africa, for example, they mentioned that they have the Leo. The Leo is the chat bot. So the idea basically behind having a bot is not to take off jobs from people. That's something we get to hear a lot. The idea rather is to make work easier for agents who we have in the customer service team, since they are the ones who usually get inquiries. And so we notice that, once you're offering a service, you have a product you're selling, there's always people. The idea is to have customers. And if you're having customers, there would always be people who want to know more about the services you have to offer. How can they get it? What do they need to do? How do they activate their accounts? Depending on whatever niche you are, that would determine the kind of conversations that you have. But then what we notice is that every time there would be repetitive inquiries. For instance, bringing it down to my own company, where it's an health insurance company, we have people always asking us about, what plans do you have? I have my grandma who has this and that. What plan can I get for her? Or I want my child to have access to immunizations. What plan can I get? So there's always, you notice that at the end of the day, the whole idea is how to get your plan or what the plan costs. Yeah. So everything still falls under one use case of your plan, of them getting your plan. Yeah. So, we know that, for instance, the price of your plan would always be constant for a period of time. So how then do you make it easy for workers not to always have to send? Because we know it's canned responses that they will then send. Canned responses where they've drafted something, and then people now feel bad that, oh, you're just sending me automated messages. So I mean, why not take off that load from them? Get this AI assistants, the virtual assistants, the bots, the voice bots, chat bots, whichever one you want. Why not get them to be like the middleman? So whenever there are inquiries on, oh, what plans do you have? How do I get your plans? The assistant is able to say, oh, so we have this, and this is what it costs, and you can get this. But then when the inquiries are now more complex, because of course we are humans, it could even be somebody asking about a plan, but maybe the way they decided to go from A to P, from A to point P, and then down to point C. And the bot is not sure what they are asking for, or maybe they have so many queries. Then they can pass that user to the customer service agent. So the idea really is not to take off jobs. We still need our customer service agents. The idea is just to reduce their workload so that they are able to focus on more complex issues. And then it helps them be more productive and more effective. So that's where the conversation designer would then come in. So coming into that picture is you're designing, you're predicting, you're using case studies, you're using your past, your data that you have from, depending on how long your business is, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, what things do our customers ask us repetitively that they can actually do on their own, like self-service. So the conversation designer gets that information. Oh, the conversation design generalist. So I will be talking about the generalist now. Between them, there are like specifications where you can simply focus on getting the data, or you can simply focus on designing the conversation, or you can focus on the end part where the bot is already out there, and then people are interacting with the bot, and you're finding, oh, you're looking for, oh, where is that point where the bot was unable to get what the user was saying? So there are various parts, but I would just take it as a generalist where you are able to do everything. So the conversation designer then gets the use case, use that to identify intents and entities. Intent and entities basically are those where you will cap, for instance, the people who want to buy plans. So plan inquiries, you can take that, and then have various references or be able to guide them on how they can get information to this, how they can have access to this information. Then it's not just making them have access to this information, but also making it conversational such that they still feel like they're talking to a human, not information overload where you just dump a whole list of things to them and then think that you're giving them the information. So after that, the other part where once the bot is out, then you start identifying where are the places that we need to improve on to better improve our bot coverage. So basically that's what the conversation designer does. And getting into this field is, because it's a pretty new field, it's an emerging field. So there's a lot of opportunity to come in now. So it's not so easy in Africa, I would be honest. However, it's if you check online, you see there's so many companies abroad who are employing conversation designers, conversational AI. See a lot of names that they use, but it's still the same category. So yes, we in Africa, for someone who wants to get in, my advice would be firstly network a lot with people in the field. Don't be discouraged that they are not in Africa, so their use cases will be different. No, the end is still the same ideology at the end of the day. Either you will be designing for Nigeria, for Kenya, or you'll be designing for Netherlands. It's still the same knowledge that you use. So connect with people, attend seminars, attend webinars, take there are some challenges that they do online. Some people you can follow, Eli Black, for instance. Eli Black, she even has she has a challenge that she has running. She has had it running for months now, where you just get to work on. There are like small use cases where you work on and then share what you've done, and people give feedback on, oh, you can improve on this, you can do that. So join challenges, use that to build. I mean, like that, you're building your portfolio, because whenever you see an opening, there's always a need for you to upload your portfolio or something, or prove to them that you know what the field is all about. So with all of that, you'll be able to build your portfolio and then apply. I mean, you can be working remotely. There are some that are remote. So you might say, oh, I do not want to leave Africa. So yes, you can streamline your search to remote roles and still also take courses. There's courses online, like Conversation Design Institute. They have various courses that you can take. So yeah, I think that's it in summary. You can follow us for more.
To prod a little further, what do you know about whether there's conversational design available in local languages in Africa? So like for your company in particular, are you building bots having conversations in English? Are you including other languages spoken in Nigeria, given that this is where you're based?
So I would be very frank. For now in my company, we design just in English. Although the platform that we have allows us to use multi-language. But one thing that I can tell, I mean, to a large extent, though I know it's a limitation for us in Africa, is that we do not have all these platforms that offer this service. We do not have African languages. So when you see like a feature that has a multi-language, you see it having French, Arabic, Italian, everything except for the African languages. So it makes it very important for us who are coming into this field to help our community and help us just provide this data out there. There are translations for other languages, but either we do not have here or they are not readily available. So if there's a way that we can make it readily available, I'm sure that there will be companies that will pick it up. I mean, African languages, if you can have Arabic, cool. I mean, I think it's just fair. So although I know of a company that's working on having that, incorporating Yoruba, for instance, which is in Nigeria, incorporating Yoruba, incorporating a few other languages, but they are still in the building stage. So, and I mean, there's a lot of resources that would go in there. But if we have big companies like Google, like Mozilla, like Amazon, helping us to gather this, because it is a lot of data gathering for us to get to that point where they can actually use it. Because it's a different thing having the translations, and it's a different thing having that translated message, meaning this what you actually want it to mean. Because using Yoruba, my language, for instance, one word can mean like three things. It is just the emphasis, the voice emphasis, and the intonation that makes it different. So it's going to be a lot of data gathering, which would take some time, I agree. But if we even have something working, yes, that would help us that would make it more inclusive, because I'm sure we have places in Africa where these people cannot read or they cannot write. So if they are able to have this virtual assistants speaking to them in their language, or converse or chatting, whatever, in their languages, it makes it more inclusive, because at the end of the day, the goal is to have an inclusive design, not just a great design. So that's my take on that.
Okay, thank you for the insights. I think it's a good segue into what I do and what that as a role looks like in the voice ecosystem. So as I've mentioned, I'm working at the moment on a fellowship as part of Mozilla Foundation. And this work involves building particularly for Kiswahili. So I also think it's a good segue from what Danny has just been speaking about, because in my case, I'm building language technology, or rather speech technology, for an African language, which is Kiswahili. I've actually worked in this space for a couple of years. And before I was building for Kiswahili, I was working on a group of languages that is much smaller, or has a smaller number of speakers. So it's called the Luya languages, or they are called the Luya languages, and they're spoken in parts of Western Kenya and Eastern Uganda. And I think this is the irony of languages in Africa. We have so many of them which are spoken by potentially millions of speakers, but then when it comes to the availability of digital resources available online, it's very few, and it's unfortunate. But then the availability of digital content or digital resources is actually not a reflection of how vibrant the languages are, because many of them are used very widely. And I'm going to quote a colleague of mine who said that we're almost at this turning point where if technology does not understand your language, or if your language has not been stored in some form on tech platforms, then the possibility of it dying out is very real. And I think that's also reflective in your work, because a lot of the tools we're building are in English. And so we keep reinforcing the importance of the English language, but then not focusing as much on our local languages. And it's unfortunate that many of us, speak English. So it's like, okay, you don't have Kiswahili, I'm just going to go ahead with English. But I'm digressing a bit. So I would define my role as an NLP researcher. So I sit in research, I would say in academic research, but then particularly in industry, because I'm not sitting at a university, and we're building speech recognition tools. So in terms of a background, I studied math and computer science, and I think that gave me a good foundation in terms of foundational knowledge to venture into fast data science. So I started in data science, and then went into machine learning, and then went into NLP. And now I work particularly on speech recognition, or in building voice tools. I'm a techie. To some extent, Denny, I would describe you as a techie as well. But then I also want to share that in talking about roles in the voice ecosystem, when attending the Women in Voice Summit, which took place last month, it was very interesting for me to discover that a huge part of the summit's attendance, and even just the focus of conversations, involved voice actors. And it got me wondering how big the voice acting ecosystem is in Africa. I don't know if there's any literature on it, but it certainly exists, because we have ads where you hear recognized people's voices, right? There's prominent people whose voices are recognized and who are paid money to feature on ads or do that kind of thing. But I don't know if we recognize it as an industry. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the fact that you actually don't have to be a techie to take part in the voice ecosystem. You may be someone who is a personality and has a recognizable voice. You may have what is known as a radio voice. I see a lot of conversation about people with like deep voices, and they call that, the late night radio voice. And that's an opportunity to take part in this ecosystem. And while at the Women in Voice Summit, I attended one session which it was a panel, and it brought together the lady who was the voice, or is the voice of Siri, and the lady who is the voice of TikTok. I'm not a TikToker, so I don't understand where TikTok has a voice, but then she's the voice of TikTok. And again, it was very interesting for me to see this tech platform that's brought together the non-techies and the techies almost at an equal platform and just give voice to, pun intended, give voice to all of them. Yeah, so in terms of the variety of roles available in the voice ecosystem, Denny, do you have anything else to share before we move on to the next point of this conversation?
Yeah, so I think that it's so wide. That's the good thing because it's a new field. So there's so many opportunities. There's, see the conversation design I was talking about, for instance. You can specialize in at least 3 roles still within that space. You can be the product architect, where who gets the conversation, the use cases, or checks the platforms that you'd use and what are the limitations of these platforms? What do we want to achieve with our board? What platform can get us this? So you have that. That's on its own. Then you have the person thinking of, okay, so we have this use case. How are we starting? What do we want to have? What intent or entities do we want to have? That's another one on its own. It's a full-time job. Then you have the AI trainer, who is just not focusing on how the whole bot started, just focusing on, okay, so we have this bot. How do we ensure that this bot is performing optimally? And that's just in conversation design. There's still so many. In fact, some companies go as far as still further branching out, depending on how big they are and depending on what use case they are. So there's still, just like, I like that you mentioned the voice actors, because before I used to think that voice actors were not included now. But that interestingly, we have so many voice actors. And it's like, that's on its own. And truly, yes, we have some in Nigeria. We have some voices that we know. There's even a guy who you see on practically every company's advert. Even my company uses it. So that's for the face now. Now think of the person whose voice you're using. We have one person who I know has done adverts for 3 different companies, big companies. So you don't even need to have any tech background whatsoever. So that's just you being able to have a good command of your voice and being able to use it to your advantage. And that's and then there's also still those who just work, now going to the Siri, Alexa, for instance, those who gather the data. That's a job on its own. That is a job it's a running job for years, because you're always gathering data. You have data analysts. You don't need to know how to code. In fact, there are so many platforms out there. I don't know how to code. I do not. Maybe over the years I would put up for 1 or 2 courses just for my own learning purpose. But you do not need to know how to code to get into the field. Coding is just one small part of the tech company, or the tech field. So there's so many things you can just, it's so broad. We can't even remember all or mention all. So yes, there's a lot of opportunities. And thank God that there's Google there. You can research and see so many things and know which ones do you align with, which ones do you think you can perform well with, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you for that. So moving on to our next point, which is talking about what opportunities there are for voice technology. And I think we've touched a bit on this in our conversation already. So Denny, you've mentioned that in Africa, there is a significant population that is not literate, which means they're not able to read and or write. But then of course, literacy does not, it's not a marker of intelligence, because it's quite possible that these people, yes, did not get an opportunity to go to school and to learn how to read and write, but then they may be, fully formed functional adults who potentially hold down a job, maybe as casual laborers or in some other field, but are able to, make a living, potentially support their families and just live a life, right? So yes, they're able to live a life, but then also their access to certain resources, particularly digital resources, is hindered because of their inability to read and or write. So at least when speaking about the opportunities for voice technology in Africa, this is one thing that I see repeated a lot, just the fact that voice technology could lower the barrier for entry for this population of people. Let me take this opportunity to share a bit about the work that we're doing at Mozilla. So in building speech technology, two of the application areas that we're keen to engage in are in agriculture and in finance. So agriculture, because it's a huge, is it a huge earner in Africa? I'm not sure if it's a huge earner in Africa, but then I know that we have many farmers on the continent, and food security is an ongoing question. So wanting to become more efficient or to produce much more food year on year is something that is definitely useful on the continent. So in seeking to build voice technology that can be used in agriculture, some of the applications that I've seen proposed is like an information kiosk or an information IVR center. And I think this can be very much likened to the conversational bots that you're building, except this would be fully voice driven. So it may be that you make a call and you as a farmer who is growing maize have noticed that the leaves of your maize are starting to turn yellow. So you can make a call and have a conversation in Kiswahili with this system and let it know what the symptoms you have noticed are, and then get some sort of feedback on suggestions for what you can do to rectify this. So it may be that you need to use a certain fertilizer, or you need to de-weed the plants, or I don't know, I'm not in agriculture, but essentially it would be something like that. And it may not be even an IVR system, it may be an information kiosk. So in areas where there's low connectivity, it may be that maybe on market day or on a certain day of the week, it's likely that the farmers go to a city center where there's a booth set up, and now at the booth they can have these conversations with the bot, find what information they need, but then also continually the system gets to record all these real conversations with farmers, and over time become better at giving suggestions that actually are relevant to the geographic region or are relevant to the particular crops that are being used. And then now moving into finance, I think finance is an area of interest for us, largely because we're seeing an alternative way in the industry in finance. So the rest of the world is very much built in banking systems, and then people get to a certain age and they open bank accounts, and through that they get credit cards, and that's a line of credit. And over time you're able to take loans, and maybe you can start a business with this loan or expand with this loan. But then in Africa, many people don't get to the point of actually opening bank accounts. And mobile money came and revolutionized everything, because it's much easier now with just a mobile phone to have a mobile money wallet. And with that, it's easier to make transactions. I could pick up my phone right here, right now in Kilifi in Kenya, and send money to Denny, who is in Nigeria, and she would get it in like an instant, right? Versus banking systems and the fact that it would take 2 days or 3 days for that to happen. So mobile money has revolutionized a lot, and we're seeing other products come along with that. So people are now getting loans much faster. People are able to save and invest together. In Kenya, we call it chamas. People form chamas. In English, it's called table banking. And we want to see what happens when we introduce a voice element to it, right? So a lot of these chamas are organized very casually, in that everybody has a mobile banking wallet. You maybe have a treasurer, and every month people send money to the treasurer, but then we want to see what happens if you build an application, for example, for a chama, and now people are able to check check the balance for the chama using voice, or are able to get the statements for the month to see whether everybody has contributed, or to just find out details such as that, in addition to just financial literacy. So again, there's a huge conversation about the fact that there's now many applications, mobile applications that people can use to borrow money, but then it is potentially driving the youth of Africa into debt, because there's not so much accompanying education, financial education, as to how to use debt to your advantage, rather than, borrowing from platform A to pay platform B, and then next week you're going to borrow from platform C to, and the cycle continues, a debt cycle continues. So that's two areas where I see opportunities for voice technology. And over to you, Denny.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole lot that can be accomplished out there. One person, for instance, can decide that, so for the voice ecosystem in Africa, or even say in specifically maybe Ghana or Nigeria, and the person can say, okay, so I just want to design this virtual assistant that would converse in Igbo or in Hausa, and just do that well. And that's it. Before you know it, it's going to be explosive. And so many people, you're ending up employing so many people, you're building, you're improving on that. And then so now imagine the number of languages we have in Africa. And imagine if one person would pick a language each and decide that I want to work on this. So you can imagine the various opportunities in there. If, for instance, I want to build something, a voice bot, for instance, for Yoruba in Nigeria, I would need the services of a web developer. I would need the services of a mobile app developer. I would need the services of the data analyst. I would need the services of basically everything, even down to human resource, which people wouldn't even normally link with tech. Because at the end of the day, you're running a business, a company on its own, and you need all these inputs from all of these specialists to get the best that you can achieve. So that's just bringing it down to even the languages we've been talking about. So now imagine taking it out of just languages now, and now going further as to like the financial market that you want to target. Imagine all the various niches that you can have in just that sector. So imagine how many opportunities would be open to people in that field. So in fact, some people could just be, you're not even for voice bots now, you're not even going to be the voice of the bot. You're just going to be the one who does the wizard of voice testing. The wizard of voice testing is where, when you're done with the design or your first draft of the conversation, how you think it should go, you then test. You and someone else, you test. So the idea is you're not looking at each other. You're not giving off any body language, because of course for voice, the listener wouldn't be seeing any body language. It's just what the bot is saying. So, and then you can have it such that you back each other, or you even have it over. I mean, now we're doing virtual text where you just do not give off any body language or any other stuff like that. And then you're testing. So your own role can even be just, you're part of the wizard of voice testing, where you're testing these bots. okay, did this sound right? Did this sound a bit off? Can we change this? Can we better fine tune this? So there's so much. There's really so much, and it's a lot. It's a lot, basically. So it's just like I said before. It's just to find which one, the one that aligns most with each person.
Okay.
Because we are all different. We have various interests. We have various motivators, and then that would influence your decision. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to the final point of our conversation. It's a great opportunity for us to invite people to learn more about Women in Voice activities, and for them to just know where they can find us and where they can learn more about us at. So, Denny, I'm going to invite you to handle this part of the session, if you don't mind.
Okay. So, yeah. So we at the moment we have a page on LinkedIn, Women in Voice Africa. We have a Facebook page too. We also have, I believe we have an Instagram page. So for Twitter, the handle is Women in WiV Africa. I think we can probably drop this in the chat box or something, so it can be easier for people. So LinkedIn is Women in Voice Africa, Twitter at WiV Africa. So we can always connect with us on there. We have webinars that we're planning for you. So please join. Whatever suggestion you have you can always look for us, whatever comments. Yeah, I would use that to build on the next webinars, seminars, workshops, however it might be, that would be the best delivery method. Yeah.
Cool. So all I'm going to add is that we're approximately 3 months old. So we're still extremely young, and any input as to, what the ecosystem in Africa actually needs would be very, very welcome. And with that, we are going to close the conversation. I know our conversation is supposed to be an hour long, but then hopefully this leaves time for a live Q&A. Yeah, that being said, thank you very much for listening to this conversation, and see you somewhere soon. Bye.